The statement of Robert E. Lee, who's no longer in favor, did you ever notice that? No longer in favor. Never fight uphill, me boys, never fight uphill. They were fighting uphill. He said, wow, that was a big mistake.
Never fight uphill, me boys. Never fight uphill, me boys. Never vote for a crazy person, me boys. That's the most important thing to take away from Donald Trump's speech in Pennsylvania. It is April the 16th, 2024. 203 days remain until we discover the choice of the American people. Trump or America? Trump or President Biden? Never fight uphill, me boys. Never fight uphill, me boys. According to Donald Trump, speaking at a fascist rally in Pennsylvania, that's what Robert E. Lee said at the Battle of Gettysburg.
The statement of Robert E. Lee, who's no longer in favor, did you ever notice that? No longer in favor. Never fight uphill, me boys, never fight uphill. They were fighting uphill. He said, wow, that was a big mistake. He lost his great general, and they were fighting. Never fight uphill, me boys, but it was too late.
Now, we know something for certain. Robert E. Lee was a traitor, a cruel slave master, who, when he marched his army into Pennsylvania, captured and kidnapped every free black person they could find to send back south into slavery. That's Robert E. Lee. But Robert E. Lee was also a fluent English speaker who was never a pirate, didn't own a parrot, and so far as we know, had no associations with leprechauns. Never fight uphill, me boys. Of course, that's exactly what Robert E. Lee ordered on the third day of the Battle of Gettysburg, when he sent George Pickett marching uphill, destroying his army and the Confederate cause. Gettysburg is a sacred place in the story of America because it is the place where the United States was saved, and it is the ground where our country came to its closest moment of ending forever. Within 2 minutes, actually. Chaos on the battlefield was caused by an incompetent general who had been a New York congressman. Incredibly, this guy, Dan Sickles, had shot his wife's lover in broad daylight in Lafayette Square 150 years before Trump said he could shoot someone in broad daylight in Manhattan and not lose any votes. Sickles got away with the murder through the nation's first insanity defense. And on that second day of the Battle of Gettysburg, he had moved his troops far out of position. The Confederate Army was attacking, about to end run the Union lines and be in a position to sweep the Union Army, the American Army, off of the high ground. And the result would have been that Robert E. Lee's Confederate Army was between the Union Army and the White House, meaning it could march on Washington, D.C. It could carry the Confederate flag across the chambers of the Senate and the House of Representatives. It meant that Lee's army could take Capitol Hill, which wouldn't happen until January 6, 2021, but I digress. What happened at Gettysburg was the American army crushed the Confederate army. It is the bloodiest battle in American history. And there were words spoken about it that describe what happened at Gettysburg. They're Abraham Lincoln's words. Behold them. Read them. It's a short speech. It's a speech that reconsecrated the United States of America. It gave it, through words, a new birth of freedom. It attached the American cause to the ideas and ideals of the Declaration of Independence. It was the birth in a form and fashion of the Second American Republic. Abraham Lincoln redeemed the American Revolution by ending slavery and enunciating the ideas, ideals, and principles of liberty, the foundation of human rights for all people. What Trump did is desecrate those words, but that's to be expected because Donald Trump stands at a point on a compass that is 180 degrees away from Abraham Lincoln, America's greatest commander-in-chief, America's most noble president. Trump is his filthy opposite. Trump is the low man to Lincoln's high man. He is the worst president in American history. Stupendously ignorant. But beyond that, he's also almost 80 years old. And let's talk openly and honestly about how the American media would have covered this if Joe Biden had said it. Imagine if President Biden got up in a rally and said what Donald Trump said. Imagine if it was your parent. Imagine if it was a pilot in the cockpit. What would you do? Personally, I would run off the plane. And if it was moving down the runway, I'd take the fine because I'd blow the hatch and jump out of the plane on the sliding air mattress. Why would the American people elect somebody who is incoherent, who is ignorant, and maybe not sentient, not in command of his faculties? There is something that has to be talked about directly when you watch that because of the incoherence. Has Donald Trump lost command of faculties? Is he suffering from dementia? We do know that Donald Trump, as a politician, uses projection as a primary weapon. So, because he is the most corrupt president that has ever been, he attacks an honest man as being corrupt, and his propaganda channels do the dirty work day in, day out. Whatever Trump says about someone else, it is almost always the case that it is true about Trump, but not the person he is attacking. Over and over again, Donald Trump attacks Joe Biden, who is preoccupied this weekend with leadership, with being president. Here's the president in the Situation Room. Here's Donald Trump making up quotes from Robert E. Lee. And remember, the Confederate Army was obliterated on the third day because Robert E. Lee, against the advice of General James Longstreet, ordered George Pickett to lead a charge. Uphill, me boys. Uphill, me boys. Fighting uphill. The world is at a dangerous place, a dangerous hour. The Iranians fired 300 missiles, cruise missiles, ballistic missiles, and drones at Israel, who has not yet responded. The whole world is a tinderbox right now. There is war in Europe, and the Ukrainians are being starved of bullets and shells and weapons, and the Russians are advancing, and Vladimir Putin has his eyes set on the next country and the one after that. What does the Chinese wolf see in the Pacific? Do they see American strength or American weakness? Perhaps it is the case that all of this instability is being driven because foreign enemies, foreign dictators look at the chaos in America caused by Trump and they believe it's possible, likely even, that he will come back to power. So now they are making their move. We stand in a moment where the lessons of the 20th century matter a great deal. And Donald Trump knows nothing about anything. But there is another difference between him and Lincoln. Lincoln was the man who said, with charity for all and malice towards none. Abraham Lincoln, at the end of a horrific civil war, talked about reunion and reconciliation and charity. He talked about the widow and the orphan. He talked about binding up the wounds of the nation. Donald Trump talks about opening and creating new wounds. He talks about violence and revenge and retribution. Everything that Abraham Lincoln was and stood for, Donald Trump refutes. He is against. He stands in opposition to. Abraham Lincoln was the savior of the nation. Donald Trump promises to be its ruination. It is funny and absurd. Never fight uphill, me boys. Never fight up hills. Never fight uphill, me boys. Never fight uphill. And you can see the glazed and plasticized faces of the drones, the human mannequins behind him, who've surrendered their agency, their intellectual sovereignty to this abject, stupefying idiocy. This thermonuclear ignorance about our story, about our history, about the valor, the guts that it took to overcome the army of menace and hate and slavery that Robert E. Lee took into Pennsylvania, trying to end the United States of America. He failed, just like Donald Trump will fail in his attempt to unravel the cause of freedom by taking power. Churchill talked about this. He said no decent person in public life would ever seek to be anything other than the servant of the people. They would never aspire to be a master of the state and of the people. But that's what Trump aspires to be. He looks at Xi Jinping. He looks at Putin. He looks at Kim Jong-un. He looks at the Ayatollahs and he admires their absolute power. He loves their strength. He loves the notion that he is above the law. But he's not, because this is America. And Abraham Lincoln's words remind us who we are, which is the exact opposite of who Trump tells us we are. That's why Trump's idiocy in Pennsylvania matters. Because it's a desecration of the American flag, of the American story, and of the profound sacrifices that were made at Gettysburg by tens and tens and tens of thousands of young Americans who lay their lives down so that we may live in freedom today. When Donald Trump desecrates that story, when he slanders our country, when he insults the United States, he cuts at that heroic legacy, and it is an abomination. Freedom is precious. And the election of a dangerous fool like Trump into the most powerful office in the world is a prelude to catastrophe. There are 203 days to go. This is the warning. Thank you for listening to my political commentary. If you like what you heard today, please also consider subscribing to The Warning daily newsletter on Substack.